Are you confused about inflation and how it impacts your money? Well, you're not alone. Just about everybody wonders that. But here's a secret. Understanding it can actually help you grow your wealth. So in this video, we're going to decode inflation so you can protect yourself from the very real effects of it. All right, so first and foremost, the one thing you need to know about inflation is you just have to acknowledge that it's very real. For so long, I had a lot of people just try to avoid this very topic. Why? Well, it's true because inflation really, when you look at it, it's not a positive thing for many people, especially if you're of the saver mentality. And even if you're the spender mentality, it's not a good thing either, right? Because it just gets more expensive all the time, meaning you have to work harder. But from a saver mentality, it's just taking more money out of your pocket. And from a financial advisor perspective, when I used to be one, I didn't like showing high rates of inflation because if I did, it meant that you had less to retire on. That is not a positive conversation that I wanted to have with people. Because showing them saying, listen, you're gonna put away all this money per year to live on 20,000 a year lifestyle. Yay! That was definitely not a positive conversation. So even as a financial advisor, I would lower the inflation rate even down below what I know, not just what I know inflation to be, but sometimes even what they would say inflation is, right? Now, when we are told it's 2 or 3%, we all know that's bogus. The truth is that real rates of inflation that has been manipulated by the government's numbers is really closer to at least 6, 7, maybe even closer to 9% per year. Now, if you're only earning 7% a year in the stock market, that is depressing because that means that you're just keeping up with inflation at best. And if you have, like most people, where you have mutual funds that don't perform that well, you might even be losing to inflation each year, almost like you're having a bank account, but with more drama and more bipolar nature of it going up and down, right? So just acknowledge that inflation is very real and it's gonna be eroding your money. You have to admit that it's there and that you've gotta combat that. But that's good, right? You also have to know what causes inflation too. I love the quote what my friend Rabbi Daniel Lapin said. He said, inflation is just evidence of corrupt government. Now, I know you can debate this one all day, but it's true. When the Treasury and when they decide to keep printing more money, especially when there's more money being thrown out, we saw this happen in 2020, right? I mean, there's so much money thrown into the markets to try to keep the markets buoyed that what it ended up doing is creating a much bigger bubble that's now starting to pop right now, and that's gonna affect you. It doesn't help you, it actually hurts you in many cases. So you wanna make sure that, of course, that inflation really is just caused from them usually printing more money. It's not always a bad thing when it's kept in check, but really it's just a natural thing that's gonna be happening, especially as they have a currency that has no real backing. It has no real value. It's not based on gold. It's paper money, right? It's really based on computer. It's really, we're about as close to digital right now without being called digital because it's just a bunch of zeros and ones. And they're gonna keep printing more money, which is why, by the way, the government doesn't care about paying off their debt. I know it's a surprise because you hear about debt ceilings creating all this kind of drama back in May, but you know what? They don't care. They don't want to pay off the debt because they know that if whatever they're paying on those treasury notes, if it's less than inflation, and of course you want to cause more inflation, just keep printing more money, well, guess what? You make more money. It's kind of like when we were talking about investing, right? When you invest and you say, wait a minute, if I invest and I get a mortgage at, say, 5%, but inflation's at 6%, that really means my mortgage rate is negative 1%. I'm making money off the bank's money, so why wouldn't I borrow more? That's exactly what the government says too. So that leads me to my next point here is which investments are best when you're dealing with inflation? Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go into investments that don't have real tangible value. Now, I'm not saying things like the stock market cannot inflate as well. They generally do inflate with inflation, especially if there's more money supply. Now, if there's inflation happening, but people aren't spending money, you see stocks crash. So inflation is not always a good thing for stocks. It can be at different times, but it's not always. And that's the problem with stocks. It's very arbitrary. It can go up or down. It can go left or right. It can do whatever it wants to do, really, and it's based on things that you have zero control over, which means if you don't have control of your money, of your investments, you don't have control of your freedom or your life. I don't like to have my money in places like that where I'm gambling in places like the stock market, even though I used to do that. That was my number one choice in the past. I've since learned better. What got me to be financially free was not the stock market, it was more things like real estate, which are real assets, things that actually have tangible value. In fact, when there's a lot of inflation, naturally the smarter investors flee and put their money into things that are real assets. Just like gold and silver. You'll see gold and silver often will go up with inflation, right? Same thing happens with real estate. It goes up more with inflation. I'm sorry, but digital currencies, don't do that. Crypto is not the kind of thing that's gonna go up with inflation. Like the stock market, it can be affected by it, but it can also have the inverse relationship as well because it's speculative. There's no real tangible value, and it's not something that people can say with inflation, yes, this should go up. That's where people will flee to go into that. That's why, and it's not just a structure, just so you know, with real estate, it's not just the structure. In fact, the structures actually lose money, they depreciate. But the land is what appreciates. So remember that real estate is one of the safer places to put your money and investments to not just combat inflation, but even beat inflation, especially if you focus on cash flowing investments. And that leads me to my next point, guys, is how do you really protect yourself against the effects of inflation? Because there's a lot of ideas out there, but I'll tell you, I'll take number one, and this is kind of like a little extra bonus here. One of the best things you can do to protect yourself from the effects of inflation is increase your income. Now, you might say, well, that's brilliant, Chris. Great, I'll just click a button and my income increases. Nope, I'm not saying that, guys. I'm saying you've got to understand what allows you to make more money. Understanding cause and effect. Money is just the effect, it's not the cause. The cause of money is actually value creation. How do you go about creating more value? How do you become more valuable, either if you're in business to your customers or clients, or how do you become more valuable to your employer, to your boss? How do you become more valuable to them? How do you increase your skills? This is the same thing. I'm not the first one to say this. Warren Buffett said this just in 2022, saying, if you want to fight inflation, become more valuable, right? Increase your skill sets. Increase your ability to create value for that company or for your customers or clients. That is the number one key to fighting inflation. Because the one thing I love about business, especially me being in business myself, is that as inflation goes up, well, a lot of times so can my costs. Think about the grocery stores, right? Even think about restaurants. What did they do to you? Inflation came up, costs came up. Those costs came up too. And just so you know, people are still spending money at the freaking restaurants, sometimes even more so than they should be. That's still happening because of inflation. So business can be a great inflation hedge if and only if you still keep providing more value, or at least decent value. It's not that hard, but if you're an employee, obviously you're not in business, go to your employer and instead of saying, hey, I deserve a raise, I need it because of inflation. Don't do that. That's lame, okay? Instead, go to your employer and say, what is it that I can do? How can I become more valuable for you and the company that allows me to be able to have a raise? What can I do for you that would actually earn me this raise, where I would actually earn it? And don't say deserve or anything like that. Like really say, what can I do to earn this raise? What can I do to actually be valuable enough that you want to pay me more? And then shut up and listen to the answer or answers. I had one client who actually did this, and the boss says, do these 3 things, and he did, and a few months later, he got that raise. And the crazy thing is my friend didn't just stop there. He kept trying to add more value, and the guy gave him a raise again a few months later. And then there was a promotion at work, and he got a promotion, got a raise again. And then at the 1-year annual review, he went and did the review, says, I over-delivered, here's all the things I did. He basically named his salary. He almost doubled his income in just 18 months. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to double your income in 18 months, but that's a great way to fight inflation. And that also allows you to save up more money, and then you could take that money you're saving and go and buy into real assets that actually have cash flow. Cash flowing investments are great. I love the fact that with my rental properties, for example, that rent also goes up with inflation. And as that goes up, the great thing is I get paid more and more every year off that cash. But I make a higher rate of return because of how I've leveraged using banks to get a mortgage on that property. I actually make a higher rate of return than what inflation is going up. So even though the rent goes up X%, I make a multiple of that percent. And so that's why I've had properties that have done 200, 300% in the last 3 to 5 years. Not because that's guaranteed, not because that's going to be your situation, but because not only did inflation help the value, but the cash flow also increased with inflation as well. That right there is how you combat inflation and even profit from inflation as well. All right, guys, so if you think this is great, please leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and keep watching. There's another Make You Rich series video that you should check out right now.